Assemble the spices. We've got about half a teaspoon of allspice. That's half of a star anise. About half a teaspoon of cloves. A teaspoon of black peppercorns. Into the spice grinder, I'm going to put this mixture, as well as one. This is a red chili that I dried myself in the oven overnight. It's quite hot, but I'm just going to use one of them, and then this will be ground up as the seasoning. Here's what it looks like after it's ground up. I'm adding a full teaspoon of coarse salt to this. I don't want to put this in the grinder because otherwise, of course, it wouldn't be coarse salt anymore. It would be finely ground salt. And then this is what we're going to spread on. I'm using for this is wild boar. I just took a knife and I made some X's, crosses along the fat line to make it render out a little easier. Just try to coat it fairly evenly, both sides, of course. And you don't really want to get it on the fat cap because it'll burn on the fat cap. We're going to brown the fat later, so don't put the seasoning on that. Put it on the meat. You can press it down into it. And the rest of the seasonings that don't stick to the meat, we can scrape off into the pan later on. We want to use all these. Okay, this is good. Now I'm just going to let the meat sit like this for a little while before we actually begin cooking it. Make the sofrita next. Into the bottom, the pressure cooker. I'm adding a little bit of oil to start it off with. And it's heating already. I'm going to put this meat down, fat side down. So what we're going to do is we're going to start rendering the fat out of that. We're going to use that to cook everything. After about 10 minutes on medium heat, you get the fat looks like this. You can see that. Give it just a tiny bit more here on the edge that's still a little bit less cooked. Okay, when you're satisfied that this is nicely evenly browned across the entire piece, move that off to a platter. We've got a good amount of fat rendered off of it. Here we have to work somewhat quickly and deliberately. We've got Spanish smoked paprika or pimenton. I'm going to add just a generous teaspoon to this. So you can't let this sit here or it'll burn. So right after that, the onions go in. And begin stirring this right away. You want to make sure that all of the pimenton comes into contact with the hot oil. That's why you add it first. You do not want it to burn. So you got to be ready to follow it up with the onions right away. Cool it back down again. And then once the onions are coated, now you can add this tomato puree. Basically a sofrita, like you would use for a paella, but slightly different. Okay, now I can throw the garlic in. Got half a dozen cloves of garlic. I've got 2 chili peppers. These are mild peppers I dried myself. These are very similar to the kind of peppers that they make paprika from, but they're dried in the oven overnight, so okay, this is even distribution of the ingredients. Now we can put the meat back in. Slide this meat back in here. And I'm going to add just a little splash of water. We don't need much because the onions have moisture in them, and so does the meat for that matter. So I'm just going to add a little bit of moisture to it, seal it up, and bring the pressure up. Get it up to pressure. And after the time elapses, you let it sit in the pressure, under pressure, until it completely cools off. Then you have something that's it's pretty thick on the bottom. You're going to pull the meat out of there, put it on the platter. Okay, we got the meat out. This is going to cool down further. And then we have this very thick, goopy material. This needs to be passed through a sieve, rubbed through a sieve. It is really the right way. If you have a food mill, this is the time to use one. I'm using it with medium holes. It's not the coarse setting, it's not the super fine, it's medium fine. And this will save a lot of time. And once it's in there, crank it around a few times, back it up, go forward again, and in a matter of seconds, you'll have this finished. If you use a sieve that you're rubbing through, it's going to take you quite a few minutes. Then you have the task of taking the meat off the bone. They still have this fatty strip along here. If you're real health conscious, you can discard this. It's actually very delicious. It tastes really good in there, but it's up to you. But at any rate, you have to take a knife and work this off. This isn't going to be too difficult now, even though boar is a very tough piece of meat. After being pressure cooked this long, it's pretty tender. A grill pan like this for indoor cooking. It gets very, very hot. It's up to like 500 degrees now. The Fahrenheit, of course, about 300 Celsius. Then you've got the meat. This is the sauce that was strained off. Here's the meat. We're going to cook a little bit of it at a time in here. Cook it real well. Get some kind of charcoal flavor going on in there. And then as it finishes cooking, just take it off to a separate plate and repeat with the next batch of meat. Don't overcrowd the pan. Do a little bit at a time and work your way through the meat. The latter batches are better because there's smoke going by then, which flavors the meat. But when you combine it all together, kind of mix it up so that the first batches of meat you do mix with the latter batches, and then you get a smoky taste in every bite. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.